Madam Chair, thanks for being here. So many questions, so little time. Many of the questions I raise, I'll ask you to respond to for the record. First, as to REITs, let me mention that the SEC published your concept released to revisit the Congress has provided a carve-out in the Investment Company Act of 1940. We need REITs to be involved, especially in the California economy. Investor protection is paramount, but I know you'll give due consideration to the congressional carve-out of mortgage REITs and the role they play in capital formation. Now let me shift over to Iran. Companies that do business with Iran, particularly with the Iranian government, particularly in areas of strategic significance, undermine American foreign policy, but also expose their shareholders to risks, namely sanctions. And in fact, inside word here from Congress, don't want to provide insider information. Those risks are going to increase as Congress imposes new sanctions on those companies, both U.S. and foreign based, that do business with Iran and its government. By a vote of 410 members of the House, we adopted the Iran Threat Reduction Act. And I'd like you to tell us for the record what the SEC has done to further the disclosure requirements of that act. I think investors deserve to know which companies are engaged in what kinds of activities with Iran, both to protect themselves financially, but also investors have a right to make investment decisions based on foreign policy concerns as well. Chairman Schapiro, you were here back in July 2010. And you told us that you would be taking steps to educate investors. And I'd like to know what steps the SEC has taken to educate investors about the risks companies face from doing business in Iran and the potential impact of sanctions. Of particular concern is that the SEC established 4 years ago a web-based tool to allow investors access to lists of companies who, in their public filings with the Commission, disclose that they conduct a business in countries that sponsor terrorism. Now, the greatest problem with this is that it was effective, and the companies wanted to deny potential investors information about what they were doing. They didn't want to have to face investor pressure. So they pressured the Commission and they said, aha, your tool is imperfect. The response of the SEC was to pull the tool and to try to make it even more perfect. And now it's 4 years later, and nothing's been done, and the tool still isn't up. So I'd like to ask what efforts the SEC is making to reestablish this tool so that investors can easily identify those companies that do business in countries designated as state sponsors of terrorism. Why don't I give you a minute to make some oral comments about Iran, and then I'll have one other question I need to squeeze in.
Congressman, I'm going to have to get back to you on the tool specifically. I remember reading about it. It was discontinued by my predecessor. I remember there were lots of issues around it. But so I'd like to supplement the record.
The real issue was that it was effective.
That may well be the case. I will say,
and we did have a promise that it would be restored, and it's been 4 years.
I will get right on it. I will also say that the staff had been working on a disclosure rule for companies that face material risks from possible violation of sanctions legislation, and that was circulating with the Commission. But I will say that the Senate Appropriations Report for this year actually directs us to require disclosure by companies of activities that may subject them to sanctions under the Iran Sanctions Act. And the staff is in the process of developing that rule. I know it's very similar to what the House passed in December, so I can get you a time frame for that, but it is well underway.
I look forward to reading that time frame in your written response. And I hope that you'll be moving forward, as you promised us in 2010, with an education program. Finally, I'd like to shift to the FASB standards dealing with leases. This could balloon the liabilities reported on the balance sheets of almost every American company. There are economic studies that show that this rule could do real harm to the U.S. economy. And I'd like you to explain what steps the SEC will take to work with the FASB to make sure that the economic impact of any rule change is reviewed and that the SEC takes a broad policy view as to this possible change in FASB standards.
Well, as you know, we oversee the FASB, and I'm not intimately familiar with all the requirements of the proposed standard, but we'll be happy to provide you with information about exactly where it stands and what the Commission's approach will be to that.
You come here for 5 minutes and you end up with a lot of work, but thank you very much for your future steps. Thank you.
Great. Gentleman yields back. Mr. Fitzpatrick is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you.